what I do, but essentially I'm a time management specialist and I use time management as a tool to help people live better lives. And right now I'm really focused on using time management, self-care, and rest as tools to help battle burnout in many different people, from working moms to, corporate to university students who are sort of in this really stressful time for the first time in their lives. Everyone experiences burnout in different ways. And so I come at it, my focus, the bulk of my business is with moms, but I'm really diving into offering solutions for burnout more across the board because it is something that we see all over the place. And so, um, in terms of where you can find me online, if you're a mom, you're going to really want to follow. If you're not, it's still good content, but know that I mostly speak to moms on my socials. It's Grow Like a Mother, the name of my handle. And that's also the name of my podcast.
Perfect. I know when I speak to a lot of mothers, when they mention burnout is because they feel like a little overwhelmed with everything that's going on when it comes to dealing with the children, dealing with maybe their family. And one thing I did find that was common among mothers, at least new mothers, it was adapting their life from previously not being a mother, and in a lot of cases not being a wife, to becoming a mother and becoming a wife. So now they went from, let's say, one identity to like two, but they're still trying to maintain who they were before. So do you deal with mothers who are battling, trying to figure out who am I, what am I, day to day, week to week, year to year?
I think that's all mothers, honestly. We're so consumed with each new baby, but especially the first one, with our new role, because not only do we have a dynamic shift in our home with a new person in there and all the responsibilities of figuring out how to keep that thing alive, but also you've changed, right? Your body's changed, your hormones changed, your role has changed, and your entire life is now at being run for a time by someone else's needs. And I think the hard part comes, I mean, that part is very hard, but the hard part comes when your child grows out of needing you as often, but you don't grow out of your role of responding like this. And so a lot of moms, and I'm still guilty of this, my kids are 5 and 7 now, but it's like the minute they need something or they ask something, whether it's a need or a want or just my attention, my instinct is to automatically react, stop everything, because when I became a mother for so many years, I had to do it that way. They needed my attention if they were crying or whatever, right? And so the burnout can come when I like to describe burnout as an unequal exchange of energy in and energy out. And so for moms, we are giving energy out to our people and our communities and our families all day, every day. Our energy is going out, and it's a beautiful thing. But kids aren't the best at giving the energy back. They just take, like little gremlins. They just take, 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 right? They don't give you a lot back except for the occasional like sloppy kiss and an I love you here and there. And while that's amazing and that's what we live for, it doesn't fill our cups up. And so a lot of mistakes that I see happening are moms not knowing that it's really up to them to go ahead and work those things into their lives that do give them energy back, that do give them enjoyment back and rest and love and all of these different conversation, right? Like intellectual stimulation, whatever it was that happened that filled their cup and made them before they took that role of mom, they still need that. But it's a lot more difficult to get simply because you have to initiate it in a way different way than you used to have to. So that's where we're getting stuck.
I wonder if that some of that is because mothers feel some sort of like guilt if they're not paying too much attention to their children. Let's say, for example, if they drop them off at the grandparents or the auntie or the uncle, and they just want like a me day,
Yeah.
like right, like I know when I speak to some of the fathers and their parenthood, I think the dynamic is a little bit different. Is subconsciously many of us men, I'm speaking now, will divert the responsibility to the mother. In some cases by default, right? Because the first year they need the mom more than the father at that point. But then when you have, let's say, a couple that wants to be very involved, but they still need time for themselves, I wonder if guilt plays a factor. Do you run into that as well when you're discussing this with them?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. There's so much guilt because, and it comes from all situations, right? There's guilt from the dads that they can't be the one to do the breastfeeding in the early days. They don't know how to help their spouse or sister, friend, whoever who is in the thick of motherhood. So there's guilt that they can't step in. There's guilt from the mom who stays home in that she's neglecting a different part of herself or her career. Maybe she's feeling guilty that she's not able to put as much energy into her relationships, her friendships. But then there's also a lot of guilt with the working mom who is out of the home working most of the day and the kids are being tended by someone else. And I feel like that's the biggest one that we think of, but also recognizing that no matter what, there's like this whirlpool of guilt just going around, which is so hard to snap out of, but it makes sense because we want to be the best at everything we do. We want to be the best parent. We want to be the best spouse. We want to be the best friend, daughter, coworker, neighbor, like boss, all the things. And we want to do it all at the same time, which is the problem. We need to start rethinking about how we show up and being the best whatever we are at the time. So the best worker when you're at work, the best parent when you're at home, and almost segmenting life a little bit just so that you can survive and survive without this guilt. Because if you're trying to show up and be the best parent when you're at work and checking, the kids' daycare pictures all day long, or you're not being the best worker, and that's where you're at right then, you know? So I think being able to identify and show up intentionally with where you're at in any given moment is the first step to battling that guilt. But it's a constant battle for everyone. It really is.
I think so as well. Like, I don't have any children, but I know when I'm around children or even some of the women I've dated, they find that. And like, if you look at like when you mentioned burnout, and then when I look at some of the women that I'm around, even though their children are older, let's say in their teens or maybe their early 20s or their mid 20s, they still run into that where they're thinking, okay, I only could do certain things until my children are this age.
Mhm.
I'm going to wait until my children is that age. And they're feeling this anxiety overwhelmed because they don't realize until maybe later on that, oh my God, Jill, 5 years have passed. Oh my God, Jill, 10 years have passed. And it's like, Jill, where did the time go? But when you look
Totally.
up, your children went from diapers to needing you to help them with their homework till they're hardly home,
Yeah.
right? So, like, speak to the women. Like, how is it that if they want to avoid burnout in, let's say, being a mother and jumping back into a relationship, if that's their thing,
Mm.
how do they stay grounded enough to say, hey, yes, what Jill's saying is correct. I need to figure out who I am and what I'm going to be day to day. But there's times where I look up and I don't realize years, not weeks, have passed by.
Yeah. And it's really common, right? Because we're always that um, if when, right? We're if when thinkers. So if I win the lottery, if I get the promotion, then I can spend the money on this. If the kids grow up, or when the kids grow up, they can do sports activities on their own, then I'll have a little bit more time for myself or whatever. And the antidote to that is really just staying in the moment. It's mindfulness in its essence. But if we take a look at it from the lens of mindful self-care, that's what I like to recommend specifically to moms. It's a buzzword. Everyone is aware of what self-care is or isn't. Like, is it bubble baths and massages, or is it runs and like 75 hard? Who knows? But the thing is, it is what it is for you. Self-care is literally taking care of yourself. And it seems impossible. I have a lot of moms that say, like, yeah, I get it, but like, when, how am I supposed to do this? And you're absolutely right. Their thought process, which isn't wrong, and I totally get where it's coming from, is that I'll have to wait until before I can do things for myself. And while, yes, the reality is that in different seasons of motherhood and different seasons of what your child needs, you will have different availabilities. You'll have different capacities. Um, just like with work, you have busy seasons and slow seasons, right? Just like with your relationship, you have ups and downs. The same thing happens as you go through these seasons of parenting. But if you can create a base through line for yourself of, I am the type of person who, fill in the blank, takes care of herself, prioritizes rest, drink lots of water. Choose one thing to start that makes you feel like you've got a bit of control, and the thing has to actually motivate you or make you happy or give you some kind of benefit. It can't be something wishy-washy, or it won't matter enough to you to keep it going or to see the benefits. But starting small, because oftentimes it's all or nothing is the way that we think. And that's not necessarily the answer. I always use this as an example in that it's something for me that I choose to do every day is learn a new language. And I have that app, right? Duolingo, that I can literally go on for 1 to 2 minutes a day. And as long as I'm consistent, now I'm noticing I'm starting to think in that language. And I've only been at it 3 months, right? So if I see, I saw a donkey on a show the other day, and I thought in my head, yella, which is the Scottish word for donkey. And I was like, oh my God, that's crazy that I'm having that much progress, even though I'm only spending 2 minutes a day, right? And so recognizing that you can still work towards a goal or claim some time back for yourself or keep your relationships with your friends, even when motherhood is taking over. It's just you can't do the same quantity that you might want to. And so it's a balancing act.
Is that a realization that is difficult for some mothers when they realize that maybe I can't do it the way I want to do it, but I have to find a compromise to actually be able to do it?
Hmm. And the interesting thing too is that sometimes I'll flip it and think and offer this sort of reframe for moms is that if you have a goal that you want to, let's say, run a marathon or start a business or go back to school or whatever, but you can't in your season of life make that happen right now. That doesn't mean you don't start the steps. It doesn't mean you don't, let's use the example of running a marathon, which I've never done, by the way, but just in theory. Um, it doesn't mean you can't buy a pair of running shoes that make you like they're bright, sparkly pink or that make you smile, like whatever speaks to you. That doesn't mean that you can't go out and push your baby in a stroller and then start up to jogging or whatever you do to train for a marathon, however that process works. That doesn't mean that you can't start reading books and listening to podcasts and meeting other people, joining those communities who are interested in that thing. And it doesn't need to take a lot of time, but those are all things that you can do before you run a marathon, right? You're not going to wake up and do the marathon. Same thing with any goal. There are steps you can take, and even if they're small, by doing those small steps slowly while you're in a phase of life where you don't have a lot of capacity for yourself, you're building the foundation so that when your kids are at the age where they're at school and you have some extra time or they can go on sleepovers, bam, you're not starting from zero. You're starting from 50% because you've built that foundation. So it's all worthwhile progress. It's kind of that analogy of the iceberg, right? Like you're working underneath the water until